The metal corridors of the Galactic Council station stretched endlessly in every direction, but no footsteps echoed through them. Ambassador Murray pressed her palm against the cold wall and felt nothing, no vibration from the massive engines, no hum from the life support systems, no whisper of air moving through the ventilation shafts. The station that had been home to thousands of beings from 17 different worlds was completely silent. "This is impossible," whispered Captain Juan as he checked his scanner for the 10th time. "The readings show the station is fully powered. All systems operational, but there's no one here." Murray's 4 eyes moved independently as she scanned the main assembly hall. The great chamber where representatives from across the galaxy had gathered for 300 years stood empty. Conference tables remained set for meetings that would never happen. Half-finished meals sat on plates, growing cold in the recycled air. Personal belongings lay scattered, as if their owners had simply vanished mid-conversation. "Look at this," called Lieutenant Sora from across the hall. She stood beside a communication console where a message was still playing on repeat. The holographic display showed Ambassador the Colin of the Hegemony, his usually calm demeanor replaced by barely controlled panic. "Emergency transmission to all member worlds," the recording began. "We have received reports of attacks in the Outer Rim. Entire colonies have gone dark. No survivors. No bodies. Just ... empty worlds. The attackers call themselves the Devourers, and they are moving toward the core systems. We are attempting to establish contact, but..." The message cut off abruptly, leaving only static. Murray felt her stomach tighten. The Hegemony controlled the most advanced military in the galaxy. They were afraid, then whatever was coming was beyond anything they had faced before. Ambassador Juan said quietly, "We found something else." He led her to the central command center where the main computer still functioned. The screen displayed a star map of the galaxy, but something was wrong. Entire sectors that should have been marked with the bright symbols of inhabited worlds now showed only empty darkness. 17 systems, Guan said, his voice barely above a whisper. All went dark in the past 10 days. No distress signals, no requests for aid, no final transmissions. They just ... stopped. The pattern was clear and terrifying. The attacks were moving inward, following the major trade routes toward the most populated systems. Each world that fell brought the threat closer to the heart of galactic civilization. "What about the defense fleets?" Murray asked, though she already suspected the answer. "Gone. All of them." The Zephyrian Empire's 3rd Fleet was patrolling the Kilo sector when it happened. 27 ships, including 3 battle cruisers. The automated distress beacon transmitted for exactly 14 minutes before it went silent. Murray studied the map, trying to understand what kind of enemy could destroy entire fleets without leaving survivors to report what had happened. The greatest military minds in the galaxy had spent centuries perfecting their defensive strategies. But none of those strategies seemed to matter against this new threat. "We need to warn the remaining worlds," she said. But even as she spoke, she knew how inadequate that sounded. Warn them of what? An enemy they couldn't see, couldn't understand, couldn't fight? As if summoned by her thoughts, the communication? Systems suddenly came alive. The main screen flickered and displayed an image that made everyone in the command center step back in shock. The transmission came from the Crystalline Collective's homeworld, one of the oldest and most peaceful civilizations in the galaxy, but the being speaking was not one of their crystal-based life forms. It was something else entirely, a dark, shifting mass that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. "Your kind speaks many languages," the thing said, its voice-like, the sound of dying stars. "But you do not speak the language we understand. You offer words when we require sustenance. You negotiate when we need only to feed." The image shifted, showing the collective's beautiful crystal cities. But now they were empty, their inhabitants gone, leaving only hollow structures that no longer sang with the harmonious vibrations of their creators. "We are the Devourers," the being continued. "We harvest what you call consciousness, what you call soul. Your fleets, your weapons, your treaties, these things are meaningless to us. We take what we need, and we move on. Soon, all your worlds will know the silence you have found here. The transmission ended, leaving the command center in stunned silence. "How many worlds are left?" Mireille asked. Giwan consulted his scanner. "Based on the pattern, maybe 50 inhabited systems remain untouched. The Devourers are moving fast, but they seem to be focusing on the most populated worlds first. Then we need to gather every ship, every weapon, every ally we can find," Mireille said. "Send a message to all remaining worlds, including the outer colonies. Tell them to prepare for war? All of them?" Sora asked. "Even the primitive worlds?" Mireille looked at the star map, where a small, insignificant system marked Sol blinked in the outer rim. "All of them. We're going to need every ship we can get." Admiral Tayon stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching his sensors as they tracked the approaching enemy fleet. The Zephyrian Empire had ruled the outer rim for 2 centuries. Their ships were the fastest and most advanced in the galaxy. He had never lost a battle in 30 years of service. Today, he was about to learn what defeat felt like. "Contact in 30 seconds, reported his tactical officer. "Enemy fleet composition is ... unusual, sir. The ships don't match any known design patterns." Tayon studied the display screen. The Devourer vessels looked more like living creatures than machines. Their hulls rippled and shifted like skin, and they moved through space with an organic grace that defied all understanding of physics. Some were massive, the size of small moons, while others darted between them like parasites feeding on a host. "Batteries, prepare to fire," Tayon commanded. "Target the largest vessel first." The Zephyrian fleet opened fire with everything they had. Plasma cannons that could melt through solid steel. Particle beams that could split atoms. Missiles that could crack planets. All of it struck the lead Devourer ship. Simultaneously, the weapons passed through the enemy vessel like it was made of smoke. "Impossible," whispered the tactical officer. "Direct hits, but no damage registered." The Devourer ships responded by doing something that would haunt the survivors for the rest of their lives. They began to feed. Invisible tendrils of energy reached out from the biomechanical vessels, touching the Zephyrian ships with gentle precision. Where the energy made contact, the hull plating began to dissolve, but not in any normal way. Simply ceased to exist, as if reality itself was being consumed. "Emergency power to shields," Tayon ordered. But his words were drowned out by the screaming that had begun throughout his ship. The crew members closest to the hull were changing. Their bodies remained intact, but their minds were being drained away. They stood at their posts, eyes vacant, hands still moving over their controls, but the consciousness that had driven them was gone. They had become empty shells, still alive, but no longer truly present. "Sir, we're losing crew on decks 7 through 12, reported the medical officer, her voice shaking. "They're not dead, but they're not. They're not there anymore." Tayon watched in horror as his own tactical officer turned to look at him with blank, emotionless eyes. The man's mouth moved, but the words that came out were not his own. "Your resistance is noted but irrelevant," the officer said in a voice that belonged to something else entirely. "We require your neural energy for sustenance. Your consciousness will serve a greater purpose." The Admiral drew his sidearm and fired, but the officer didn't react to the plasma bolt that struck his chest. He simply continued staring with those empty eyes while his body burned. Across the fleet, similar scenes played out on every ship. The Devourers were not destroying the Zephyrian vessels, they were harvesting them. Ships that had taken decades to build and years to crew were being turned into ghost vessels. Their hulls intact, but their crews reduced to mindless automatons. "All ships retreat immediately," Tayon broadcast to his remaining fleet. "This is not a battle we can win." But it was too late. The Devourer ships had surrounded them, and their feeding had intensified. Tayon felt his own mind beginning to fray at the edges as the invisible tendrils of energy probed his thoughts through his failing consciousness. He managed to send one final transmission to the inner worlds. "The Devourers are not conquerors. They are farmers, and we are their crop. They leave the bodies, but take the souls. Warn everyone. Tell them to run." The transmission ended as Admiral Tayon's mind joined the collective consciousness of the Devourers. leaving his body standing, empty at the command post of a ghost ship. 3 days later, the same fate befell the Crystalline Collective. Their homeworld had stood for 10,000 years, its inhabitants living in perfect harmony with their environment. The Devourers consumed their entire civilization in 6 hours, leaving behind only empty crystal formations that no longer sang. With the voices of their creators, Captain Sujin, of the Hegemony, watched the recordings from her cruiser's long-range sensors. The most advanced military in the galaxy had prepared for this attack, learning from the mistakes of the Zephyrians. They had developed new weapons, new tactics, new defenses designed specifically to counter the Devourer threat. None of it mattered. The Hegemony's great war machines, each one capable of destroying a planet, were reduced to empty hulks in minutes. Their crews joined the growing army of hollow-eyed automatons that now served the Devourers. The enemy had grown stronger with each world they consumed, their biomechanical ships now numbering in the thousands. "Send the emergency signal," Sujin ordered as her own ship came under attack. "Contact every world in the galaxy. Tell them we failed," her communications officer, still retaining enough consciousness to follow orders, transmitted the desperate message across the galaxy. The signal reached every inhabited world, including a small, blue planet in the outer rim, where a species called humans had just achieved faster than light. The message was simple. All seemed lost. The Devourers cannot be stopped. If anyone receives this, prepare for extinction. Captain Sujin felt her thoughts slipping away as the enemy's influence took hold. Her last conscious act was to lock the ship's computer, hoping that someone, somewhere, would learn from their failure. Ambassador Murray stood in the command center of the massive defense station at Nexus Point, watching the largest fleet in galactic history take position around her. 12 different species had put aside centuries of conflict to stand together against the Devourers. Ships that had never fought side by side now formed a desperate wall of metal and energy between the enemy and the core worlds. "Fleet status report," she requested, though she already knew the numbers by heart. Every ship that could fly, the weapon that could fire, every soldier who could fight had been gathered here for this final battle. 2,300 vessels in defensive formation, reported Colonel Heinwu, the fleet's military coordinator. The Valix Consortium contributed their entire navy. The Hegemony survivors brought their experimental weapons. Even the peaceful Orion Republic sent their cargo ships armed with mining lasers. Murray nodded, but her compound eyes remained fixed on the long-range sensors. The Devourer fleet was approaching, and it was larger than anything they had imagined. The biomechanical ships moved through space like a living storm, their numbers now in the tens of thousands after consuming 17 civilizations. Ambassador called Communications Officer Gina. "The Devourer fleet is within transmission range. Act! Should we attempt to make contact?" Every military advisor in the room turned to look at Murray. She had spent her entire career finding peaceful solutions to impossible problems. She had negotiated treaties between species that had been at war for millennia. She had prevented 3 separate galactic conflicts through careful diplomacy and patient understanding. "Open a channel," she said, ignoring the worried looks from the military officers around her. The main screen flickered to life, showing the interior of one of the Devourer's ships. The walls appeared to be made of living tissue, pulsing with an alien rhythm that hurt to watch. In the center of the image stood a figure that had once been humanoid, but was now something else entirely. A collection of different species merged into one horrifying form. "We are the Devourers," the creature said, its voice a mixture of thousands of different beings speaking in unison. "We know why you have gathered here. You wish to negotiate." "Yes," Murray replied, stepping forward. "Seek a peaceful resolution to this conflict. Surely there must be something we can offer that would satisfy your needs without requiring the destruction of entire civilizations." The creature that had once been multiple individuals tilted its head, studying her with eyes that belonged to a dozen different species. "You offer peace to those who hunger. You offer words to those who require sustenance. Tell us, Ambassador, what do you believe we want?" "Territory," Murray said, her diplomatic training taking over. resources, strategic advantages, political influence. Whatever it is, we can negotiate terms that benefit everyone. We want your minds, the creature replied simply. Your consciousness. Your dreams, your fears, your memories, your souls. We consume what you are, not what you own. How do you negotiate with hunger itself? Murray felt her confidence wavering, but she pressed on. Then take volunteers. Surely some beings would be willing to sacrifice themselves to save their species. We could establish quotas, rotation systems, willing participants. You would feed us your people like cattle, the creature said, and for the first time, something that might have been amusement flickered across its merged features. How fascinating. You truly do not understand what we are, and explain it. To us, Murray pleaded. Help us understand. There has to be a way to coexist. The creature leaned forward, and the camera view shifted to show the interior of the Devourer ship. What Murray saw made her step back in horror. The walls were lined with the empty bodies of countless beings from every species they had consumed. The shells of former people stood in neat rows, their eyes open but vacant, their bodies preserved but their minds gone forever. These are not dead, the creature explained. They are empty. Their consciousness feeds us, gives us strength, helps us grow. Each mind we consume makes us more than we were. We are not destroyers, Ambassador. We are farmers, and you are our crop. But there has to be another way, Murray said desperately. Some form of symbiosis, some mutual benefit. You speak of benefit as if we are equals, the creature interrupted. You are food. Food does not negotiate with the hungry. It simply feeds them. The transmission ended, leaving the command center in stunned silence. Well, said Colonel Heinwu grimly, I guess that settles the diplomatic approach. All ships, prepare for battle, Murray commanded, her voice steady despite the terror she felt. Signal the fleet. Tell them diplomacy has failed. The Devourer. Fleet struck without warning or ceremony. Their biomechanical ships move through the defensive formation like predators through a school of fish. The combined weapons of 12 species had no effect on enemies that seemed to exist partially outside normal space and time. Murray watched her life's work crumble in minutes. Ships that represented the best of galactic civilization were reduced. 2 empty hulks, floating in space. The crews did not die. They were harvested, their bodies left intact but their minds consumed. Send the final transmission, she ordered as her own station came under attack. Tell every world in the galaxy that we have failed. Tell them to prepare for extinction. As the invisible tendrils of the Devourers reached out to claim her consciousness, Murray's last coherent thought was a prayer that someone, somewhere, would find a way to stop them. Admiral Dong Yuk sat in his office at Seoul Defense Command, drinking his morning coffee and reading reports from the outer colonies when Lieutenant Yeben burst through the door without knocking. Sir, you need to see this immediately, she said, her face pale with shock. We just received a transmission from outside the solar system. It's not good. Dong Yuk set down his coffee cup and followed her to the communications center. The main screen showed a complex alien message that their computers were slowly translating. As the words appeared in English, the Admiral felt his blood run cold. Galactic. EMERGENCY. 17 civilizations destroyed. Enemy called the Devourers. Harvest consciousness. All seemed lost. ... How long ago was this sent? Dong Yuk asked. The transmission traveled for 3 days to reach us, Yeben replied. Sir, according to the star charts, these attacks are moving toward the core systems. At their current rate, they'll reach the Outer Rim colonies within weeks. Dong Yuk studied the tactical data that accompanied the message. The numbers were staggering. Entire fleets of advanced warships had been destroyed in minutes. Civilizations that had existed for thousands of years had been wiped out in hours. The enemy seemed unstoppable. Get me Fleet Commander Minho, he ordered. Emergency meeting in the war room, and wake up the president. She needs to hear this. Within an hour, the top military leaders of Earth were gathered around a holographic display showing the galaxy. Red markers indicated the worlds that had fallen to the Devourers, while blue markers showed the remaining inhabited systems. The pattern was clear and terrifying. "The enemy is systematic," explained Captain Jinsu, the fleet's intelligence officer. "They target the most populated worlds first, then use the harvested consciousness to make themselves stronger. Each victory makes them more dangerous." "What about their technology?" asked Commander Minho. "The reports mention that conventional weapons don't work against them. The alien ships seem to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously," Yeben said, highlighting the technical data. "Projectiles and energy weapons pass through them without causing damage. They use some kind of consciousness-draining field that turns their enemies into empty shells." President Jiang leaned forward in her chair. "So what you're telling me is that we're facing an enemy that 17 advanced civilizations couldn't stop, using technology we don't understand, and they're heading in our direction." "That's correct, Madam President," Dong Yuk replied. "The question is, what do we do about it?" The room fell silent as everyone considered the implications. Earth had only achieved faster-than-light travel 50 years ago. Their fleet was tiny, compared to the armadas that had already fallen to the Devourers. By every logical measure, they should prepare for evacuation or surrender. "I have a question," said Commander Minho suddenly. "These other civilizations, how long had they been spacefaring?" Jinsu consulted his datapad, and the youngest was the hegemony at 800 years. The oldest was the crystalline collective at over 10,000 years. Most of them had been exploring the galaxy for millennia. And in all that time, had any of them fought a war of extinction? "No," Jinsu said slowly. "According to the cultural data, most of them had evolved past warfare centuries ago. They settled disputes through negotiation and trade agreements." Minho smiled grimly. "That's what I thought. These species spent thousands of years learning how to make peace. We spent thousands of years learning how to make war. What are you suggesting?" asked the president. "I'm suggesting that maybe the Devourers have never faced an enemy that was designed specifically to kill other living things," Minho replied. "Every weapon we've ever built, every tactic we've ever developed, every instinct we've ever had, all of it focused on one goal: destroying our enemies completely." Dong-Yuk felt something cold and hard settle in his stomach. "You're talking about genocide." "I'm talking about survival," Minho corrected. "The Devourers don't negotiate, but they don't take prisoners. They don't leave survivors. They are a threat to every living thing in the galaxy, and they have to be stopped." "But our fleet is tiny compared to what they've already destroyed," Yeben protested. "We have maybe 300 ships total. They have tens of thousands. We don't need to match." "Their numbers," Minho said. "We need to match their ruthlessness. The other civilizations tried to defend themselves. We're going to attack them." President Jiang stood up slowly. "Are you recommending that we take our entire fleet into battle against an enemy that has never been defeated?" "I'm recommending that we show them what happens when they threaten humanity," Minho replied. "The galaxy spent centuries learning to live in peace. We never forgot how to fight a war." The president looked around the room at her advisors. "How long do we have?" "Based on their current trajectory, the Devourers will reach the nexus point in 6 days," Jinsu reported. "That's where the last survivors are making their stand." "Then we have 6 days to prepare," the president said. "Admiral Dong-Yuk, I want every ship we have ready for combat. Commander Minho, you're in charge of the fleet. Show these Devourers what happens when they pick a fight with the human race." As the meeting broke up, Yeben approached Minho quietly. "Sir, do you really think we can win?" Minho looked at the star chart showing the approaching enemy fleet. "Lieutenant, every other species in the galaxy learned to solve their problems with words. We learned to solve our problems with explosives. Let's find out which approach works better." Commander Minho stood on the bridge of the Terran flagship as it dropped out of hyperspace at the nexus point. The sight that greeted him was worse than the reports had suggested. Thousands of empty ships drifted in the void, their hulls intact, but their crews gone. The Devourer fleet floated among them like vultures, their biomechanical forms pulsing with the stolen consciousness of 17 civilizations. Enemy fleet composition, he requested calmly, as if he were asking for the weather report. Approximately 15,000 vessels, reported Lieutenant Jinwoo, his voice tight with barely controlled fear. Sir, they outnumber us 50 to 1. Good, Minho replied, surprising everyone on the bridge. If they were evenly matched, this would take all day. The Devourer ships began to move toward the human fleet with that same organic grace that had terrified every other species in the galaxy. Their consciousness-draining fields reached out like invisible tentacles, probing for the minds they intended to harvest. Sir, I'm detecting the same energy signatures that destroyed the other fleets, reported Captain Yebin from the sensor station. They're trying to establish a neural link. Let them try, Minho said. Ginwoo, signal all ships. Execute Plan Omega. The human fleet spread out in a formation that looked random to any observer but was actually carefully calculated. Each ship took position at a specific distance from its neighbors, creating a three-dimensional web of overlapping fire zones. The Devourers struck first, their biomechanical ships phasing, partially out of normal spacetime to avoid the weapons that had proven useless against them. But as their consciousness-draining fields made contact with the human ships, something unexpected happened. Sir, Yebin reported with amazement in her voice. Their neural probes are being blocked. Our crews are showing no signs of consciousness drain. Minho smiled grimly. Turns out that spending 10,000 years in constant warfare teaches you a few things about protecting your mind. Every human soldier has neural shielding implants. We learn to guard our thoughts long before we learn to guard our bodies. Devourer ships hesitated, confused by their inability to harvest their prey. In that moment of uncertainty, the human fleet struck back. All ships, weapons free, Minho commanded. Show them what we brought to the party. The Terran vessels opened fire with weapons that no other species had ever conceived. Instead of trying to hit the Devourers in normal space, they targeted the dimensional rifts the enemy used to phase between realities. Gravity bombs collapsed, the spatial distortions, trapping the biomechanical ships in normal spacetime where they could be hurt. Direct hit on the lead vessel, Jinwoo reported with excitement. It's taking damage. But the humans were just getting started. As the Devourer ships were forced back into normal space, the second wave of the attack began. The Terran fleet launched weapons that turned the enemy's own harvested consciousness against them. Neural feedback torpedoes away, reported the weapons officer. Target the ships with the highest concentration of absorbed minds. The torpedoes struck their targets and released the stolen consciousness all at once, creating a psychic shockwave that tore through the Devourer fleet like a virus. Ships that had been strengthened by consuming entire civilizations suddenly found themselves overwhelmed by the combined rage and defiance of their victims. Sir, the enemy fleet is breaking formation, Yebin observed. They're trying to retreat. Not today, Minho said coldly. Jinwoo, signal the fleet. Begin Phase 2. The human ships moved with a coordination that amazed even their own crews. Every captain knew exactly where to be. Every gunner knew precisely when to fire. Every pilot understood their role in the greater plan. This was warfare as an art form, perfected over millennia of human conflict. The Devourer ships attempted to phase shift away, but the humans had prepared for that too. Dimensional anchor mines had been seeded throughout the battle zone, creating a cage of twisted space-time that prevented escape. The biomechanical vessels found themselves trapped with an enemy that refused to be harvested. They're trying to communicate, reported the communications officer. The lead ship is transmitting. Put it on screen, Minho ordered. The image showed one of the merged beings that spoke for the Devourers. But now its multiple faces showed something new. Fear. You cannot do this, it said, its voice no longer confident. We are the harvesters. We are the inevitable. You are only food. No, Minho replied, his voice carrying the authority of an entire species. We are human. We don't negotiate with extinction. The final phase of the battle lasted exactly 18 minutes. The human fleet moved through the trapped Devourer, vessels like a surgical instrument, targeting the neural cores that stored the stolen consciousness. As each biomechanical ship died, the minds it had consumed were released, creating brilliant flashes of light that illuminated the battlefield. When the last Devourer ship was destroyed, the Nexus Point fell silent. The threat that had consumed 17 civilizations was gone, reduced to scattered debris and fading energy signatures. Fleet status report, Minho requested. All ships operational, Jinwoo reported. Minor damage to 3 vessels, no casualties. Good, Minho said. Signal Earth. Tell them the galaxy is safe. As the news spread across the surviving worlds, the galaxy learned something important about their newest neighbors. While other species had spent centuries perfecting the art of peace, humanity had never forgotten the art of war. And sometimes, when faced with absolute evil, the only language that mattered was the language of fire.